We trust that time is linear, that it proceeds eternally, uniformly, into infinity. But the distinction between past, present, and future is nothing but an illusion. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow are not consecutive. They are connected in a never-ending circle. Everything is connected.
Well, hey, everybody, welcome back.
Hello, everyone.
I'm Logan, that's Nicole, and we are Generation X Paranormal, as you know. I got a question. Have you ever wanted to hop in a DeLorean, go back in time, and see old Biff back in the old days in the Westerns? Or better yet, hop in that same DeLorean, go in the future, get that sports almanac, and be filthy rich, and probably do some awful things, because it didn't work out so good for Biff as well. What do you think?
Or put your hand on some buzzing stones, travel back in time, meet you a red-haired, kilted Highlander, and fall in love.
Oh, jeez.
Me?
Guilty. Well, guys, you're in luck. Today we have such an amazing guest that's going to help talk about that very thing. And who do we have?
Mike Ricksecker.
Yes, we do.
So he is a researcher, and he's also an author of A Walk in the Shadows, A Complete Guide to Shadow People, and Alaska's Mysterious Triangle, as well as several historic paranormal books. He's appeared on multiple television shows and programs, including History Channel's Ancient Aliens and The Unexplained, Travel Channel's The Alaska Triangle, multiple series on TV, and more. And we have him here today to talk to us about his new book, Travels Through Time.
Yes, great.
And talking about stacked time theory. There's a lot to unravel here.
Yeah, so let's, there's probably so much to go through. So let's just go ahead and bring Mike on and let's find out about time.
Let's talk to Mike.
Well, hey Mike, how you doing?
Doing pretty well. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Good. Yeah, we're doing fantastic. And honestly, thank you so much for being on the show. It's truly an honor. We've been wanting to speak to you for quite some time, so it's great to finally have you on Generation X Paranormal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate getting the opportunity to chat with you. So, yeah,
absolutely. Well, listen, we know who you are, but our audience probably doesn't or may have an idea. But if you could kind of, give us an idea of your background, kind of what got you started in paranormal and the things that you talk about.
Sure. Yeah. It really goes back to when I was a child. I was an experiencer. So it's one of those things that's always been with me throughout my entire life. When I say experiencer, for me, my first really significant paranormal experience would be what we call a shadow person. And woke up in the middle of the night with this thing standing in the corner of my bedroom. I actually had a physical interaction with this thing. And that was like the first significant incident. Had some others as I was growing up. Had my first little paranormal investigation when I was 15. Had no idea what I was doing because this was like 1989. There's no television shows like that, like they do these days, to really understand what that was. It was just we were at a friend's house. She thought that her house was haunted, and in her room upstairs, and up we went to go investigate. And turns out we were looking around the whole house for stuff. The more esoteric side of research that I do when we get into like lost and ancient civilizations, that goes back to about I've always had an interest in history, but with that piece of it goes back to like around 1993 when Mysteries of the Sphinx, hosted by Charlton Heston, a feature the work of John Anthony West and Robert Schoch, which redated the Sphinx. That absolutely fascinated me, and was like the following year the movie Stargate came out. So that just really piqued my interest. And over the years, as I followed along and researched the two, I noticed a lot of ways in which the two disciplines really connected. And the writing aspect, as far as the books, I've been writing since I was 7 years old. So that's another one that's always been with me.
Right.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic. And speaking of books, we really thoroughly enjoyed this book. Travels Through Time. It's I know we're going to get much more into this, but
I'm just gonna say mind blown.
Yeah.
Reading it. I mean, I was super into everything, but I was
Right.
just like, oh my gosh, and I couldn't wait to turn the page and see what else was in there.
And
Well, I
So
I love the
appreciate that. I'm
call.
glad you enjoyed
Oh,
it.
mhm,
absolutely. And I love the callbacks to different movies and stuff
Mhm.
like that. I won't give too much
mhm.
away, but yeah, we really enjoyed
Well,
that part quite a
We
bit.
did.
it's one of those where you're writing about this type of a subject, and you could throw all the science in the world at the thing, and people's eyes are just glaze over.
Yep.
So
Right.
you're not really going to convey your message to people as they're reading. So it's like, okay, let's make it a little fun. Let's actually relate it to things that people are going to understand, things that they've actually seen. So yeah, there's a lot
Mhm.
of pop culture references in there, and while we're talking a lot of Hollywood, those ideas are essentially a lot of those ideas were taken from real science. And while they may have
Mhm.
spun a fictional story and Hollywoodized it or what
Mhm.
have you, there are a lot of elements of truth within that. So when I start talking about different topics within the books, like, okay, you know, for an example, here's Interstellar, here's Back to the Future, and all these other
Mhm.
ones.
Mhm.
Somewhere in Time, which was one of my all-time favorites.
Great
Mhm.
movie.
Yeah, mine too. I actually went back and watched it again before we were
Oh,
going to
great.
interview you because I haven't seen it in years,
Mhm.
and so I was like, just to remind myself a little bit. But I always loved that.
And I was
No,
such a
that's
big
great.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, and I was such a big geek because, it's Christopher Reeve, so it's Superman. So I'm like,
Exactly.
it's something
Yeah.
I get to watch Superman in, and then I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool too.
hmm
So, but
Well, and I've always been a time travel person. Like
Mhm.
I just love the aspect that it could actually be possible. I've
man,
always
Yeah.
loved those movies, Back to the Future. Growing up as an '80s kid, just loved it. And now I'm the Outlander fan. I love Outlander.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, see, I love how she went back in time by actually going into a stone circle.
yes,
So that's
Exactly.
like, okay, now we're meshing those two worlds together. What I was talking about
right.
before with the esoteric side. Yeah. So that's
Exactly. Yes.
that's really cool. Yeah.
hmm
Yeah, and honestly, it's a great pivot straight into some of our kind of getting started.
Yeah.
What is time? I know that's a very broad brush to paint with, but
Yeah.
yeah, what is time?
Time really doesn't exist. It's a human construct. Basically it's a measuring tool that we've devised in order to do things like tell us when to plant the crops, when the seasons change, when to show up at the uh, bus stop at the right moment, when an eclipse is going to happen overhead.
Right.
Right. Yes.
Um,
Wow, what an episode that was.
Yes.
Absolutely. Oh, that was fantastic. Being right here in the Cleveland, Ohio area, we were like
Oh,
dead
yeah.
center for totality yesterday.
Oh,
Oh.
that's
Yesterday it was
awesome.
Yeah, we
amazing.
were
Yeah.
we were 98%.
Yeah,
We're
almost
in Missouri.
98%.
So
Okay.
we were super close, but still, I mean, wow, what an amazing event to be a part of, in my lifetime. So,
Yeah, no, it was truly special and happy I got a chance to see it. My daughter had flown in. It was her birthday on Saturday, so we celebrated her birthday and then had, of course, the eclipse party yesterday. So,
Oh, that's
man,
um,
awesome.
yeah, great stuff. But it's stuff like that we use time. Like I just dropped my daughter back off of the airport this evening, and so when does the flight pick her
Right.
up? That sort of thing.
right.
So time, actually doesn't really, excuse me, doesn't really exist. What we think of as time is really the fourth dimension, and that is where our consciousness resides. And we as human beings is truly fascinating creatures because we are multidimensional beings. Our fourth dimensional consciousness is inside our third dimensional body. So from the fourth dimension, everything else below us, uh, first dimension's a line, second dimension is a flat plane, third dimension, well, that's all the objects like the water bottle, the book in front of me, the book in front of you, all that stuff.
Mhm.
It's
hmm
third dimension. From the fourth dimension where our consciousness resides, we are able to observe and interact with all of that. Well, our theoretical physics shows us that there are up to 11 hyperspatial dimensions. So those dimensions above us, 5, 6, 7, 8 on upward, would have full access to time as if it was one object, like we view everything else in the third dimension. So that said, that means that all time would be concurrent from those other dimensions, or really the fourth dimension. They would have free reign to move in and about at will, which is how time travel would be possible.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah. When I honestly reading that in the book, it was quite a
You explain it very well. It's just like trying to think about it.
right. I had to start thinking about time as more just measurement as opposed to time. I mean, it's just yeah. It was something that I really when I was listening to it, I definitely had to go back and listen to it a few different times because that construct, as you said, it's such a big part of our lives in humanity that it really does take a moment to sit back and go, okay, looking at all these different dimensions and levels and different things, it does allow you to kind of really explore different types of realities in your mind of what could possibly exist. So it's it was pretty fascinating.
Yeah,
Just
and
thinking of
actually,
that.
defining it as a measurement is completely accurate, because for us to find any point out in space, we have to use time as a measurement because our universe is expanding, and they've really thrown us for a loop here lately. There was a article here that came out about the James Webb Telescope, and as they've pointed it at different areas of the far universe, they've discovered that actually different areas of the universe are expanding at different rates. So that's going to make
Whoa.
their jobs a little bit more
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah,
But
no kidding.
yeah, I have my
Wow.
uncle. My uncle Bill is a retired nuclear physicist, and so he read the book when he was visiting my aunt, his sister, back in the fall. And he kept bugging her in the kitchen. So she's like, "Go read Mike's book. Just get out." So he sits down and he reads it. And he came back to me. I was a couple of days later that I came over to visit, and we haven't really talked about stacked time theory yet. But basically, that idea taken that all time is concurrent. Every moment that has happened, is happening, and will happen are all stacked on top of each other. Each moment like a stack in a tall stack of photographs. So he says, I get what you're saying. I understand it, except for the fact that the universe is expanding. So where we were in the universe as a planet 20 years ago is not the same place as where we are today. So if you have all these moments stacked on top of each other like that, well, they're going to be all, spread across the universe. So how do you account for that?
That's
And
a
I was
good
like,
question.
that's a great question, Uncle Bill.
Yeah.
And I paused for a moment, and I answered his question in one word: entanglement. I said, oh, yeah, that would do it. So all of those moments across time like that, if you take the expansion of the universe into account, I suppose it wouldn't necessarily be. I'm trying to give a visual of all these stacks, because the
Right.
way we view our world, it's to us it's all stagnant. But in the grand scheme of everything, over billions and billions of years, yes, it is all moving. So really, it would be like almost like this line of all these photographs that are very, maybe they're like overlapping, as it goes across the universe like that. But I still call it stack time theory.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's when you think about it in different stacks and different layers, and I don't want to get too far ahead. Um, it really does kind of allow you to think about that how unlinear things really are. And again, I don't want to get too far ahead, but and I know we'll discuss that a little bit, but yeah, it when you kind of talked about that, and I like entanglement, by the way, that works out really well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that for some of our readers or some of our listeners rather and watchers that don't understand that, um, can you talk a little bit more about what each stack may mean, or kind of expand a little bit on what that would look like, or what that kind of explain that a little bit more? Because I think it's relative and it's important that I want to make sure our audience kind of gets that a little bit more.
Yeah. So like when we're talking about time, I give a couple more visuals here. We usually use that analogy of the river of time, which that analogy is perfectly fine. but time is just the water. It's not like the whole river itself. The And the water is not making itself move. It's moving because the banks are holding the water in place, and so it flows downstream. So basically, the banks of the river are the control system that's in place to make this happen. Well, if you remove those banks, all the water would spill out and would be ever present. It would all be there all at once, like a large pond or a lake or something like that. And you kind of move in and about the lake. Another visual would be take a town that you're driving through, and we'll say it's just a small town. As you're going down the road, maybe the speed limit's 35 miles per hour. There's a couple houses, maybe there's a little general store, church, gas station, these sorts of things. And as you drive through the town, maybe it takes you 10 minutes to drive through this thing. And you see all these things as you're going down the road. Well, now instead of driving through that town, let's say you're in an airplane and you're flying over it. Now you see that town all at once. The little houses, the gas station, the general store, the church, all those things all at once. And what you once had a relationship with in time, you now have a relationship with in space, because everything is all there concurrently.
Yeah.
So again, that adheres to the idea that all time is concurrent, again, from outside our fourth dimension. So again, just take where you're sitting right now. Every moment that has happened is happening and will happen. So going back to the very, very beginning of time itself, when the universe was created, to when the universe is gone, all those moments are absolutely right there, right now.
Wow.
And each moment is like a photo in that stack.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. It's a lot to chew on.
Yes.
No, thank you for explaining that, because I think that for the purposes, especially with the book, that I think that's such an important concept to kind of wrap your head around. That, yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, that's kind of the basis of the book. Once you kind of get your head around what stacked time theory is, then all the rest of it kind of falls into place. When we talk time slips, these doppelganger incidents that people report on, when we talk dreams and premonitions, ESP, those sorts of phenomena, deja vu, then it all starts to make a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk a little bit about time slips? Like, what are they exactly?
Yeah, so a time slip is going back to the stack of photos there, because everything in our universe is frequency, energy, resonance, vibration. So when two of those moments basically two of those photos in the stack of time, for lack of a better term, when they resonate at the same frequency for a moment, they blend into each other, and one moment will get a glimpse of another. There are a number of stories like this throughout history, where people have reported actually interacting with people from another point in time, and then all of a sudden they disappeared. So a lot of our ghost stories, hauntings, these sorts of things could be attributed to a time slip. I'm not going to say every single one of those incidents, but a number of them would be. The famous poet Goethe, there's a fantastic time slip story. It's actually been attributed to a doppelganger story. If you do like a search on top 20 doppelganger stories, you're always going to find this one on it.
Okay.
But it wasn't actually a doppelganger incident, even though he did see himself. So essentially what happened was he's walking down the street one day, and he's headed to a town called Drosselheim. He's kind of lost in his thoughts. He's having an affair with a young woman in the town. And so he's lost in his thoughts, thinking about the situation. All of a sudden, he notices a man walking on the other side of the road in the opposite direction. And this gentleman is wearing a gold-trimmed gray suit, which kind of catches his eye. So he turns to get a better look at the guy, and poof, he just disappears. He's like, whoa, the heck was that? Where'd that guy go? No idea. Can't do anything about it, so he kind of shrugs his shoulders. Okay, I'll keep on walking down the road. and he ends up going to the town. Well, years later, he's walking down that same road again, but this time in the opposite direction. And as he's coming across that location where that incident happened, he recalls it. He's like, "Oh, this is where that strange incident happened, where I saw that man in the gold trimmed gray suit." And then all of a sudden, it dawns on him. He looks down. Oh my gosh, that guy was me. I'm wearing the gold trimmed gray suit right now. I actually saw myself.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's a fascinating incident. Was something we would call a time slip, in which he got a chance to see himself at another moment in time. He got to see himself in the future there for a moment. And we have to ask ourselves what the catalyst is. How did that happen? Well, I believe that as he was walking down the road, we have to go the first time around. We have to go back to what he said. He was lost in his thoughts, which is a type of meditative state. We do it all the time when we
Right.
zone out driving down the road, and we're thinking about something else, and all of a sudden we miss our turn, we miss our exits. Oh, jeez, turn around and go back. Yeah, everybody's familiar with that. Exactly. So that's a type of meditative state. It's not a full meditative state. If we were to do that driving down the road, we get in all kinds of accidents. But
Yes.
but it's a partial meditative state. So his brainwave activity, his resonance vibration was in that state of being at that moment. And I believe that he was able to tune into his own personal resonance at another point in time on that part of the road, and he got a glimpse of it. But then once he decided to divert his attention to it, boom, he broke himself out of the meditative state, changed the frequency, and the image of himself disappeared.
Wow,
Wow,
it almost sounds like a glimpse into the future in a way.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, which is essentially what it was. Yeah, he got a short glimpse into the future. Yeah.
I know in the book you talk about the Versailles time slip. I thought that one was fascinating to me. I mean, to completely see a whole scene going on in front of you, that was just remarkable.
Yeah, that's one of the more famous ones. The two women that wrote about this, it's not like they were looking for any fame or fortune or anything like that, reporting the incident. They used pseudonyms for this. They didn't even use their real names to write about this incident. And, they were both very learned women. And it's also one of those where at the time that they were basically both headmistresses of very respected schools that were coming together because they were going to start working together. So they met together in Paris. The one woman had a flat there, and then they were going to spend some time together. And this is a point in time where up to then it was only men in these positions, so they couldn't start talking about some crazy wild stories. And the men of the era would be like, "Oh, see, we put these
these crazy women.
We put these crazy women in church." Yeah.
Right.
So
I'll be the one to say it.
Say it.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel you, Logan. Yeah. So, this is not something that, they're not going to try to risk their careers over this, but they felt compelled. They still needed to write about this because this was such a fascinating incident where they walk into the garden at Versailles, and then all of a sudden it was like a scene out of the era of the French Revolution. Just the way that people were dressed, some of the equipment, the garden equipment that they saw, the plow, and then this woman that sure enough resembled Marie Antoinette, and the way that she was dressed and how she was painting. As she apparently had was known to paint there at the one particular building, and there she was. So this was something that they were not going to risk their careers when they not only for their own careers, but for the future of women in those positions. They were not going to risk it, but they still felt that they had to write about it, and they did.
Yeah, that's so. I guess just walking through the garden, kind of in a calm, meditative state again. Yeah, to see that's fascinating to me.
So, and I know we've brought. Well, I don't know if we brought it up, but I know you've mentioned some hauntings. But can you kind of expand a little bit on your take on residual hauntings and how it may pertain to time slips?
Yeah, so a lot of times with a residual haunting is basically a playback of some sort of event at could be a house, historic building, could be on the woods somewhere. Basically, something in the area. There's a term that we use called stone tape theory, that something, whether it's in the building structure or something around that area, has retained an imprint.
Right.
Basically, retained some sort of recording of that incident. We're not sure what the catalyst is for the playback of it, but then all of a sudden something kicks it off and plays back the scene. And there's really no interaction at all between the witness and whatever this apparition or whatever this scene is. You just watch it play out. The difference with the time slip is that in many ways it resembles the same thing. You see this scene play out in a sense, except that the person on the other side, what may look like a ghost or an apparition, or some people, it just looks like, the person is fully formed in front of them, or people.
Right.
And there's an interaction, there's an acknowledgement, like, oh, hey, I see you, that sort of thing. A great example is what we call the Conjuring House in Harrisville, Rhode Island, that the first Conjuring movie was based off of, which
Absolutely.
that movie is about 2% correct to
Right.
what really
Right.
happened there.
We are aware. Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
the names are correct. It happened in Rhode Island.
Right.
Yeah, except it was not it was not an exorcism. It was not a demonic possession with an exorcism and that sort of thing. It was actually a seance that had gone bad. There were many hauntings that were going on at that house. Ed and Lorraine Warren decided they wanted to hold a seance there when they got involved. And there was an incident in that seance in which something did take a hold of Carolyn, and she was thrown back into the parlor, and then she was out cold. And then Roger promptly had the Warrens leave, and they were never seen again. But those hauntings lasted there for 10 years until they moved out. And they still go on to this day.
Yeah.
So a couple weeks after that incident, Carolyn was still kind of recovering from that. She was, you could say she was in a bit of a weakened state still. And one evening, Andrea, it was late at night, Andrea, the eldest daughter, was a very good friend of mine, was still up doing homework. And all of a sudden her mom gets up and comes in and asks, hey, Andrea, could you heat up some of that pot roast that we had for dinner, or stew or whatever it was, in a short pot of coffee? And Andrea wants to go help her mom because her mom hasn't been feeling well lately. Okay, I'll go take care of that. So Carolyn sits down in the parlor where Andrea had been. And as she's sitting there, all of a sudden in the dining room, which again is where the seance happened.
Yes.
In the dining room, she sees morphing into existence this family out of the 1700s. There's a woman cooking over an open hearth. And that at that time, that fireplace in that room had been boarded up for the previous 100 years. It was boarded. It's not boarded up now, but it had been at that time. A couple of kids running around, and then there are two gentlemen sitting at a table with pewter steins, and they turn and they look right at Carolyn. And then the one kind of nudges the other and says, well, would you look at that? And points over at Carolyn as if she was the ghost. So this is a moment where she's looking into their point in time. She's looking into the past. They are looking into the future. And then the moment dissipated away. Yeah.
Wow,
So that's a classic time slip. Yeah.
Yes.
That's amazing. And,
Yeah.
we're pretty familiar with the Conjuring home and the story, and we're pretty aware of the inaccuracies of
Yes.
of the movie.
Most of the movies.
Yeah, most of it.
Yeah.
We spoke with Chris McKennell and a different few folks who kind of set the record straight with us too. But no, that's what a great way to kind of bring that forward, because it's you always think of it reminds me of the movie The Others a little bit too, where
Exactly. Yeah.
they thought they were the ghosts, and then it ended up actually being them.
Great reference. Yes.
Yeah, wow, that kind of blows your mind because you never really think about it the other way.
No, you don't.
But no, that's fantastic.
Can you imagine what it would have been like for them?
No, I could not have. So, kind of getting to doppelgangers, I find that insanely fascinating because, the idea of maybe seeing yourself at a different point in time, Would you consider that a riff in time, or what do you consider that?
And I still consider it a time slip.
Okay.
Again, you have two of those moments resonate at the same frequency for a
Okay.
moment, and then it kind of disappears. So, for me, actual time travel would be if you could figure out how to make that uh, that synchronization
Hmm.
to stick around for a longer period of time. If we're going to use technology in real time travel, because yeah, I know you saw in the book a couple of times, I said it a few different times. Yeah, it's not going to be a DeLorean, a flux
Right.
capacitor. I
Right.
believe it's
Yeah.
more, yeah, exactly. It's going to have more to do with the consciousness in meditation. And again, as
Mhm.
we go into those different brainwave states, we are moving through different types of resonance. Our frequency is changing as we're moving around. So if there's a way that, okay, if we lock in, if we put ourselves into a state and we actually start to see it happening, maybe a piece of technology could help us to lock into that frequency so we could hang out there for a while. So that's about as much as I think technology would really be able to help us, because science and physics will say, and I've been writing about this lately on my blog. Science and physics will say, well, we could use a black hole, to
Right.
time travel, because space and time bends around a black hole. Okay, well, yeah, great. Except we're not near a black hole. We're not getting there anytime soon.
Mm-mm.
And if you could eat, even if you could survive it, because you'll probably pass over the event horizon. Even if you don't pass across the event horizon, you would be stretched out like spaghetti and you die
Right.
anyway. So it's just not
Not
feasible
feasible.
to use that. So
Yes.
yeah. So I think it's got to have more to do with consciousness and meditation. But
Mhm.
I believe, and actually, this thought here, it's really fascinating the way that people can start, can come together and start talking about these sort of topics, and those conversations can bring about new ideas. So can't say who, and I can't say anything about the project, but there was a Hollywood producer who had reached out to me a few months ago, and we're chatting about different uh, time travel ideas, and this came up in the conversation. Like, okay, if it is this, how do you hold that frequency? It's like, well, this is where technology might actually come into play, and how we might actually be able to use technology with the consciousness to time travel in this manner.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. That would make sense. And I'm kind of, I know I bring a lot of pulp stuff, or a lot of
Well,
movie
there's so many
references, but
movies. I mean, that's the only way to really reference
but I
time.
remember a movie when I was a kid called Brainstorm. Do you remember that at all? It had Christopher
Brainstorm.
Walken. They would put on this device, and it was almost like virtual reality. But I think what it did is it was able to kind of open up their mind to be able to do the AI type thing, or
Hmm.
alternate realities. But I almost envision that sort of same kind of device that would
A
maybe,
futuristic thing to
yeah,
get us
like,
to meditate enough that
right.
we could travel through time.
Yeah, that's sorry. I know it's a deep cut reference of something from a long time
No,
ago,
that's
but
fine. I see. I remember Dreamscape with Dennis Quaid,
yep,
where they had the ability to jump into other people's dreams, and they were supposed to be like trying to help people. Dennis Quaid ends up helping this kid, but the bad guy in it
yeah,
ends up
Mhm.
using it to. He's trying to break into the mind of the president of the United States and get into his dreams, and the president's been having these nightmares of nuclear holocaust.
right.
So this is very early 80s. But
Yes.
that was fascinating. And that was one of those things that always kind of stuck in my mind, was that, the ability, again, using the mind to be able to do these sorts of things.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean that makes perfect sense because your mind is relative to everything. I mean, that is how you experience everything. That's how
Yeah.
it is everything that you are. So
I mean, it definitely makes more sense than a machine
yeah, I
taking you
mean,
somewhere.
plus it probably has better wear and tear than a DeLorean. I think at least I don't know about mine so much, but
Yeah.
Yeah, no
Oh,
kidding.
jeez.
Well, and I always wondered if, with a film like Dreamscape, and I'd love to chat with him one day, with Christopher Nolan with Inception. And Christopher Nolan touched in a lot of his films. He touched on these sorts of things like Interstellar. But I always wondered if Inception was inspired in part from Dreamscape, because there are some concepts between the two that are similar.
Yeah.
Very well could be. Very well could be.
I mean,
Both of those movies just were fascinating.
I think Interstellar warped my mind. That was
Yeah.
a hard one to
Yeah.
kind of, not just to mention the emotional part of it, but knowing that those sort of dimensions do that dimension does sort of exist that he goes into
Mhm.
in the black hole. Just to see it represented, I should say, in a film. First of all,
Mhm.
I think he did an amazing job at trying to
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
conceptualize that. But I've known about that particular type of dimension before, but I'm like, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, oh, I know what that is.
And then he becomes the
Yeah.
ghost,
So
Yeah, it's just
his daughter's ghost, which I think is just
yeah,
kind of
spoiler,
what we're already talking
exactly. So
about.
and that's
spoiler
that's
alert.
exactly what we're talking about right now. She
Yeah,
thought it was a ghost, but it actually turned out to be him
yeah.
Right.
communicating across time. And so that thing that he was in, the Tesseract, that
Mhm.
was he was essentially at that point in time, he was in the fifth dimension, and the fourth dimension of time was represented in front of him every single moment of his daughter's bedroom, and they're all connected. I like the way they did it. It's all
Mhm.
connected with these strings, so kind of
Mhm.
harken back to the idea of string theory.
Yes.
But it's funny to me when you look online, just Google Tesseract. You see this idea of a cube on top of a cube, and it's like, well, that's really kind of almost a barbaric way of doing it.
Right.
It's really heavy-handed to me. And then, of course, with the Marvel movies, they
Oh yeah.
have the
Mhm.
glowing blue cube that opens up portals. And it's like, oh, that's not it at all. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the way that they did it in Interstellar, I mean, you still have the visual in any case is of a girl's room that is essentially a square,
Mhm.
so it ends up as a
Right.
cube in there. So yeah, okay, I get it. But it's not that heavy-handed cube on top of cube. It's all of these rooms that are connected infinitely, and he
Mhm.
needs to pick out that correct moment. So that idea that from the fifth dimension, he is able to see everything in the fourth, and of course below that third dimension on and downward.
Right. Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, they did well with the
Yeah,
movie to
Oh
explain
yeah.
it.
for
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
it broke a lot of people's minds trying to get their heads around because you have this massive space odyssey, and it's like you're getting that, but the
Yeah.
whole time throughout the movie, like even there's so many visuals of clocks. Like the one spaceship is actually there's actually 12
Mhm.
segments of it, so it's a
Uh-huh.
clock. There
Yeah.
are times where you hear like this ticking of a clock in the background. So they do a really cool job of giving you little hints of time throughout the entire movie. And of course, it's a race against time too. And
Right.
then
Right.
all of a sudden, boom! Now we're just going to hit you over the head with it,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
and that broke some people. Yeah.
yeah. That was definitely a
It's like one of those movies you watch and you're really quiet after you watch it for like 30 minutes because you're still thinking back on everything.
Oh no, I'm not gonna lie. I ugly cried. I'm not gonna lie.
Well,
It
a
Oh
little
was,
yeah.
sad. Yeah.
Oh
It
yeah,
was
yeah.
it
sad
was
too.
rough.
Yeah.
But so kind of getting away because Chris Nolan, I could probably talk hours about that movie. But
Yeah.
Mhm.
so paradoxes. Um,
Yeah.
I always think of paradoxes as the traditional, you know, the movies again, the Back to the Futures and all those sort of
Mhm.
things. That if you create a paradox, whole space time continuum. I'm gonna do my best, Doc Brown impression. But but you know, how does that? I guess how does that correlate a little bit with like I guess like the Mandela effect? 'Cause I know you bring that
Yeah.
up, and I know that there's probably a lot more that our audience should read in the book itself, but it's
Mhm.
such an important part. But yeah, if you could expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, the Mandela effect. It was Fiona Broom that came up with that term 10, 12 years ago now, something like that. And basically, Mandela effect or Mandela effect. Nelson Mandela had passed away, and there
Mhm.
were millions of people across the globe. They're, well, wait a minute, I thought that he had already died. And the question became,
Mhm.
well, how did all these people already think that he had passed away when clearly he had been alive for all of these years? We have the documentation, we have video footage, we have interviews. He was president of South Africa there for a while. So how did that happen? How did people think this? And so she came up with this idea of the Mandela effect, that uh, essentially something has happened in the timeline that had something had gotten changed that actually changed history, and people started coming forward saying, well, yeah, I have all these different memories. A lot of times it comes up with branding,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
Fruit Loops, Fruit of the
Right.
Loom, Oscar Mayer, all these different things. And I'm not saying that all of those are, truly remembered correctly as these other. I do think that some things are misremembered.
Sure.
Um, But some of it's really uncanny, and there are some obscure cases of the Mandela effect that really make you scratch your head. Um, and again, when it comes to the brain, I do believe it's something has happened back in time, in our past. Maybe there was a time traveler, and even if they weren't intending to change anything, that something happened where you have those ripple effects, you have that butterfly effect that did change things over time. Nobody's going back in time to change the way Fruit Loops was spelled.
Right.
That's far too trivial.
A waste of time per
Yeah.
se.
Yeah, exactly.
All that plutonium for that.
Yeah. But let's say, I don't know, we'll just say for Fruit of the Loom, a lot of people remember a cornucopia being
Hmm.
back behind the fruit. Well, the branding doesn't have the fruit, or it doesn't have the cornucopia, it just has the fruit. Well, what if in the original timeline that the artist for that, who came up with that branding, was driving to work one day, passed by a fruit stand that had a cornucopia out, was like, oh, that'd be great for the branding of Fruit of the Loom. I'll go draw that. Again, this is a hypothetical. Well, let's say that somebody goes back in time, and as this guy's driving down the work, or this woman, perhaps, our time traveler crosses the street and causes that person to slow down. Person finishes crossing the street. Now the car is going to have a different outcome. And maybe there was an accident that person gets in, or maybe traffic changes and they decide, it got congested here, I'm going to take an alternate route. Something happens that they never pass by that fruit stand, never sees a cornucopia, so that thought never comes into their head that it'd be a good idea to put a cornucopia behind them. Never happens, and they just draw it with the fruit. So inadvertent consequence of somebody just walking across the street when they didn't have any intention of changing anything, but there was that effect. So that could be something like that we're dealing with. Again, it's an extreme hypothetical here. Of course, then the question comes up when we talk paradoxes. Okay, what about the grandfather paradox? You go back in time, you do something to kill your grandfather, or basically, that's always so harsh. Kill the grandfather, and
Right.
it prevents you from being born. And that's because of science fiction story that was written back during the 1950s. This is where a lot of these ideas started to come from. Grandfather paradox, and Robert Heinlein wrote a lot of these type of paradoxical stories. Like Bootstrap Paradox, and a lot of his stories incorporated that back in the 1950s. So, I believe that when we have a real paradox that occurs, because people say, well, it's going to either erase you or just, all of a sudden we spin off with another timeline. And I don't necessarily think that. Like, I don't think that, like Back to the Future, great story, a lot of fun. I don't think Marty McFly would have started to disappear, or his
Right.
kids out of, or the other kids out of the photo. I think he still would have existed in that time, and his parents still may not have gotten together, or maybe they would have, but maybe differently. We don't know. But I don't. But I think he still would have been there, and just would have been like a man out of time. How do I continue to live in this era? Which would have been very unusual for him.
Yeah.
But what I find fascinating is, because science tries to discredit a lot of this. Back in the 80s, there was a Russian physicist. Forget the first name. I mean, it's Russian. The last name was Novikov.
Okay. We'll go
I'm
with
gonna
that.
forget trying to pronounce the rest of it. But he came up with this idea of an inconsistency principle, or a consistency principle, where basically he said, time travel mathematically is possible, but you couldn't change anything because, again, the math wouldn't work out. If you tried to change something, it would all break. So you couldn't change anything if you went back in time. So a couple other physicists, Kip Thorne, who actually was consulted for Interstellar, and Joel Polchinski, are talking about this, having conversations about this together in the 80s, having some sort of correspondence. And so Polchinski comes up with this idea of his own paradox, in which you use a billiard ball and you shoot it through a wormhole, an Einstein-Rosen bridge. Because they're physicists, they accept this because this is part of the theory of relativity. Einstein's work, we can use that.
Sure.
So shoot it through the wormhole. The other side of the wormhole exits right as the billiard ball is first about to pass into the hole to begin with. So when the ball exits, it actually knocks the billiard ball off course, never enters the wormhole. So how can it get knocked off course if it didn't enter the wormhole to begin with, but yet we have a billiard ball coming out to knock it off course? So it's the same concept as the grandfather paradox, but this is acceptable because instead of science fiction, it's a billiard ball and a wormhole.
Right.
So stuff like that is humorous to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that, just thinking about it,
like I needed a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How could it actually knock it off course if it was
never?
I have an illustration of it in the book, so people can take a look and try to wrap their heads around it.
Yeah.
There's lots of illustrations, which definitely helped me, and I appreciate that.
Oh man. Okay, so what are the reports about parallel universes running in reverse time? And I know you do really good in explaining that, and I guess basically, how would you frame that up?
I could frame it up with the fact that these are actual real scientific tests that have been conducted down in Antarctica, the NIDA project and the Ice Cube project, and they've been down there running tests on neutrinos, which are particles coming in from space, and they've been doing things to learn about the origins of our universe. In fact, they some months ago they had released a map of the solar system based on the neutrinos that they had collected. Well, while they were doing all these sorts of tests, they also noticed that there were other neutrinos coming up out of the Earth's surface without a source. And this baffled the scientists. And so, they're continuing to run tests. Okay, getting this stuff from space that we expect. Well, what is this stuff coming up out of the Earth? And this was a scientific paper in a peer-reviewed scientific journal in which the scientists working on this project and examining this said, well, these neutrinos coming up out of the Earth's surface without a source to us is indicative of a parallel universe running in reverse time. These are the scientists.
Right.
What that truly looks like, we don't know. But I've related it a lot to ancient symbolism and how I believe that the ancients knew of these things. If you're talking about, so they're not talking like multiple, millions of different universes and what have you. They're talking about a parallel universe running in reverse time. So that got me thinking about the ideas of duality, the ideas of the Hermetic principle, as above, so below, as it is on heaven, so it is on earth. We have a lot of these things within our ancient texts, within our ancient symbolism. I use this symbol of the Ouroboros, which is the circle or the snake eating its own tail in a continuous circle, which is a symbol of recycling and renewal. They used it for a lot of different purposes, whether that was for the afterlife journey. I think we see it in ancient Egypt. It's our first alchemical symbol there. We see it representing recycling of the earth, recycling of the universe, these sorts of things. And so, with that particular symbol, if you look at it, the snake has two tracks. It has an underbelly, and then, of course, the top side of it, and where they meet, where the head and the tail meet, to me is, well, if you just think about parallel universes running in reverse time, well, the beginning of one is going to be the end of the other and vice versa. And that's what you have with the snake eating its own tail, is the beginning of the one is the end of the other, the alpha and the omega. So to me, this is symbolic of the Big Bang. This is where the universe ends, but it's also, or it's where the universe begins, but it's also the end of the other ones. When people ask what was before the universe, what's going to happen, what's going to come after the universe, because it's always recycling and renewal. So I believe that that's what they were picking up on when they were doing that research down there. And now they're going to be doing neutrino. Talk about some crazy research. They are right now in South Dakota carving out these massive cavernous tunnels. They're like 500 feet long and as tall as like a 7 or 8 story building.
Jeez.
To do neutrino research between, this is near Rapid City. It's actually Leeds, South Dakota, so a little bit northwest of there, about an hour. They're using old gold mines, but they're basically going to be shooting neutrinos from there to, well, back and forth, I guess, to the Chicago area. We're talking like 800 miles. So they're going to be shooting this stuff through the Earth's surface.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is research that they're really, really interested in conducting. Yeah.
That is a monumental. It's so huge.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, just the chasm of a size that is first. And then for it to go from such a long distance, man, thanks for letting us know that, by the way, because that is amazing research.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's a massive project. $4 billion, I believe, is the cost. Yeah.
God.
Wow.
Well,
yeah, they have to be interested in it. They're spending that much money.
No kidding.
Yes.
Well, I think we want to reach into a topic that we enjoy quite a bit. Obviously, having a paranormal show, we cover a lot of different paranormal stuff, but we're big fans of UFOs, ufology, and things of that nature. And I'm sure you'd appreciate that because you have covered that quite a bit. So what about, and I know there's a lot of theories behind this, but what about ETs, extraterrestrials? Are they time traveling? Because I know that's a theory out there amongst other things, but yeah.
They can be. Where I get a little, I don't know, testy, I guess, is when some people try to say that ETs, extraterrestrials, UFOs, that they are not, that they're not extraterrestrials at all, that they are just time travelers. They are just ourselves. I believe it's a little naive to lump all your eggs in one basket. I believe these sightings that are occurring and these experiences that people have it's a little bit of everything. Yeah, I do believe some of these are craft from other planets that have traversed the cosmos to come here. Now, whether that, probably not using our classic Newtonian physics that we're using here, because that would, strap a rocket to your back and, take off.
Right.
It's not very efficient.
It's a bit barbaric when you really think about it in the long term of it, but yeah.
Exactly. It's gotten us, to the outer reaches of our planet and, a few places around the solar system. But for long-term travel, it's really not going to work. I mean, think about it. Voyager, which is Voyager 1, which has been out there almost 50 years, they're having some issues with it now, with communicating with it. But it was just, a few years back, maybe 10 years ago or what have you, that it finally reached the edge of the solar system. So, I mean, that's a person's lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is.
So that's not going to work for us. So the question becomes, okay, are they using something? We talked Einstein-Rosen bridge earlier, or wormhole. Are they using that sort of technology? Have they figured out anti-gravity, or are they using some other form of technology that we are not familiar with? Maybe they have figured out interdimensional travel and these sorts of things. So I do believe some of these are physical craft from some other place in the universe. I believe some of them are what we would call an ultra-terrestrial, something that is from another dimension, but indigenous here on Earth. So other life forms that are living on our planet, but within another dimension. We talked before up to 11 hyperspatial dimensions. Well, wouldn't you think that there are other life forms living within those other dimensions? We're in the fourth, but others are going to be in different dimensions too. So that's on the table. Yeah.
Kind of to take a note from Carl Sagan, it'd be a big waste of space if that was the case.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. And I do believe, sure, some of them are time travelers that have come, and we've talked before, all time is here.
Mm-hmm.
So why wouldn't they be time travelers from 1,000 years from now or whenever? But that doesn't necessarily mean it's us. See, that's another
Right.
thing. Well, it's just us from the future. Well, wait a second here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Could be somebody from the future, but it doesn't mean it's us from the future. The Earth right now is about 4.5 billion years old, and we have about another 5 billion years to the age of this planet before it gets destroyed by the sun when it becomes a red giant. So we're kind of uniquely positioned right in the middle of the Earth's history. But that said, the dinosaurs went extinct 64 million years ago, which is just a little more than 1% of the entire lifespan of the Earth ago. So we think that was a long time ago,
Yeah.
but in the entire history of the Earth, yeah, not so much.
Right.
Our species, Homo sapiens sapiens, our earliest fossils that we have of ourselves are about 315,000 years old. There are other hominins that are older, like Homo erectus and others
Mm-hmm.
that are older, but ours, 315,000 years. So that's nothing in the grand scheme of history.
Right.
So who's to say, take 64 million years further down the road, who or what is going to be living here then? Will it still be us? Will we have made it? Will we have not annihilated ourselves?
Right.
Will the Earth still
question.
be habitable for our species? We don't know. So it could very well be that 64 million years down the road, we've died off, or maybe we had to leave the planet because it just became uninhabitable. We had to go somewhere else in the cosmos. We figured, that traveled out, and maybe another intelligent life form evolved here, grew intelligent, developed civilization, developed space flight, and time travel and other technologies, and it could be them
Mm-hmm.
that have gone back in time, not necessarily humans, or even look at all these different possibilities. It could still be somebody from the future, but same situation. Maybe we've annihilated ourselves, we've had to leave the planet or whatever, but maybe some other spacefaring extraterrestrial beings discovered Earth, found that it was hospitable to their species, decided to land here, colonize, develop civilization, and maybe they develops time travel technology. So could still be extraterrestrial, but indigenous to Earth from the future. All three of them in one shot, right? So
Right. Yeah.
it's not, yeah. So I kind of laugh when people are like, "Oh, it's just us from the future." Maybe, but
Yeah.
We're pretty narcissistic when it comes to things
Yeah.
like
I
that.
know.
That
It's
is
us. It's
always got to be us.
yeah, it's got to be us. Yeah,
Yeah, we've done so well up to this point. It's got to be
Yeah.
us.
I know.
Uh,
So my big question, because obviously I mentioned Outlander, but the stone circles are always like
yeah,
a fascinating topic to me. And even mentioning Skinwalker Ranch, which you mentioned in the book, but watching the TV show, they think there's a portal on top of the mesa,
right.
and there is a stone circle there. And so I'm really curious, like, what you think that might be. Is that like a portal to another dimension, time travel? And there's even like mention of fairies. I know there was one story about the fairies and like a time slip or something like that involved. Can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, when we talk about these various stone circles, I love what they've been doing at Skinwalker Ranch. The research has been fantastic. Uh, I've really enjoyed. Yeah, I mean, they've been doing a lot with shooting rockets off into the air,
I always laugh.
She gives me
yeah,
such. So why do they keep shooting rockets out there?
yeah. I know the guys and they're great. And again, I love the research that they've been doing out there. But it has been we've done the rocket thing a few too many times now.
Yeah.
But when they were first doing it, it was like, wow, this is a really different type of experiment.
Right.
Um,
But they
you
did
know,
get really good data out of it. So I'm
they
not,
do. Yeah.
it was valid, but it's just like, yeah, I'm with you. It's like, okay, I think we breached the rocket.
Well,
for
my
now.
comment always is because they always see a UAP in the sky whenever they're doing it, and I'm like, I just like think if I'm the extraterrestrials or whatever it is, like there they go again.
Here they go, the rockets
You're
again.
kind of laughing at us. What are they doing? I
Yeah.
mean, there's obviously, something going on above above that area. They've pretty
Mhm.
much deduced that.
Mhm.
Just the LiDAR, showed there being an anomaly right in the middle of the triangle area. So there's a lot of great stuff that they are coming up with. And yeah, the rocket tests have revealed some interesting
Mhm.
data. To me, it seems okay. Maybe we'll add some other things in there.
Right.
But the all that said, with all the technology that they've thrown at it, to me, one of the most fascinating tests was, let's have the indigenous drum circle going on.
Mhm. Yes.
And what
Yes.
do they find with the thermal is, all of a sudden the stone circle on top of the mesa lights up.
Mhm.
Yes.
So to me, it's like, okay, right here, we have, um, it's vibration. Again, we come back to energy, frequency, resonance, vibration. They are creating a certain frequency and vibration with their drumming that activated the circle on the top of the mesa. So when we look at, okay, what did the ancients know? Why were they building these circles? What type of energy and power were they trying to harness? And I it's crazy because a lot of, I don't want to discredit our modern scientists too much, because they do a lot of fascinating work, but sometimes
Sure.
I think they're too inside their box,
Mhm.
and they're not making the connections with some of these other things. And then when somebody like myself, who's I've had my hands in a lot of things. I guess you would say I'm a journalist, and I'm not a scientist. I do have a degree in computer science, so yeah, like, you wouldn't call me a scientist. But I'm out here connecting the dots, is what I'm doing, which
Right.
is
Right.
a really fascinating situation to be in. It's like, okay, you guys with all your expertise, you can do those tests. Go for it. I'm
Mhm.
gonna stand back here, watch what you guys are doing, and make the connections. So to see that happen, and then people struggle with, or other scientists struggle with, well, what were the stone circles used for, and they're debating, was it a calendar, was it for rituals, all these different
Mhm.
Mhm.
things. But then you see a stone circle light up on top of Skinwalker Ranch, when there are many of us that have been saying, they were tapping into earth energy for a variety of different purposes. Maybe it
Mhm.
was to enter altered states of consciousness. You could do healing within these circles. Did some of these open up portals? Now, there's a great urban legend regarding Stonehenge in the early 1970s, Stonehenge hippies, in which it was a police officer and a local farmer that had reported this, that you can't do this today, but there were a couple of or a handful of young adults that were up there camping at Stonehenge, and they're having a good time, and all of that. All of a sudden, a storm rolls in, and a police officer was walking by, and a farmer happened to be up at that time. Who knows, doing who knows what? But it was like 2 a.m. and all of a sudden, the sky lit up with this blue light.
Mhm.
It might have been some sort of lightning. We're not quite sure on that point, but this blue light lit up over Stonehenge, and there were some screams that came from the young adults, and then they disappeared. They were gone, and apparently, like, backpacks and things like this were left, and that was all that was left of them. So, if that story, even if a couple elements of that story are true,
Mhm.
which again, it's more of an urban legend, but there's always grains of truth
Sure.
within these
Right.
type of stories. you know, what what happened there? Did, if this was lightning that had rolled in, coming in from a storm, did that energy activate, the lightning activate whatever Stonehenge may have originally been used for? Was it a portal or a stargate? Were they taken to some other dimension? Were they taken to somewhere else in the cosmos? We don't have the answer to that, but it should get us thinking about, they knew something.
Mhm.
They absolutely knew something, and of course, you can't go inside Stonehenge today. There's
Right.
special days where they have a celebration or whatever, but you can only
Mhm.
walk by it now.
Yeah.
But there are other stone circles you can step into. So a couple of years, it was in Ireland, and Drumbeg Stone Circle. It's a smaller circle, and you walk into the middle of it. And as you're standing in the middle and you just like talk, it is it is absolutely surreal the way that it's like you're almost, I want to say it's like almost you're in a fishbowl. You know,
Hmm.
your voice is almost muted. It's almost muffled. You can feel it kind of reverberating back at you. And I get that it has to do with the resonance, with your reverberation off the stones as you're projecting your voice to it.
Right.
Now, this is 13 out of what they believe had originally been 17 stones. It was built thousands of years ago, so those stones are weathered down.
Sure.
So
Yes.
imagine thousands of years ago when this thing was in its full glory, you had all the stones, they were at their full height, and you're doing, I'm just talking, there in the middle of drama. Imagine doing like some sort of chant
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
in the middle of that. And
Yes.
they have found evidence there were rituals that were performed there and what have you. But as they're doing their ritualistic chants, how that must have been coming back at them in the way that that circle would have been activated with that type of energy. What really happened to them? Were they using it to, again, heal, enter into altered states of consciousness, portal, stargate? There's a lot of possibilities on the table of what may have been in use, but yeah, um, I think that we're just scratching the surface at some place like at Skinwalker and others. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. And I'm glad that you brought up the chanting because I actually had a conversation with one of my friends about the same thing.
Hmm.
Because I was telling her about Skinwalker Ranch and what they did with the drumming, and but think about all the stone circles, like in Ireland, England, Scotland, Wales, and they chanted like the Druids and stuff.
Hmm.
I know that they
Yeah.
chanted, and so I said I wonder if they can hit that frequency. So I'm glad that you said that because I already kind of had that theory in my mind that that could be a possibility.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And kind of, I guess, dovetailing on that a little bit, and I know you bring that up a little bit in the book, but how about, I don't want to frame this up. As far as like ESP and things like that, is that a way that we can tune into that frequency? I mean, is there a way we can, other than the chanting and things like that, that we can actually utilize to kind of tap into that frequency?
Yeah, things like ESP, or when you have a premonition, that sort of thing. Yeah, you are tuning into that frequency. So it's something that I believe all humans have, some sort of capability to be able to do it. Some people are more naturally gifted and more inclined to be able to do it.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So they're just like, boom, I can do it. Others, it's going to take a lot of practice, and they may never, and probably likely won't ever be as good as some of these people that are gifted. It's kind of like anything else, playing piano, playing baseball, whatever. You can learn to bang on some keys. You can learn to pick up a bat and
Mhm.
hit a ball. Some people are going to be major leaguers. Others, well, you might, play some wiffle ball or some softball in the backyard. But you can at least do it to some degree, right?
Right.
You might be some people that are Liberace, others that are or Mozart or somebody, and others that they can bang out "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star,"
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So yeah, when it comes to like ESP, people are tuning into. I believe it is a type of time travel. They're able to tune into that particular moment and glean some information from it. So some people will actually get a full visual. Others will get like information, almost like data into their minds as to what's happening. Um, when we're dreaming at night, a lot of times, it's not every time, and this is the challenge. Determining, okay, what was actually dream, what was actually a premonition, because you might have a fascinating dream and you never see it play out. So, okay, it was just a dream. Other dreams, it might be a day, a week, a month later, and all of a sudden, wow, I just had a dream about that, and it was actually a premonition where you're, because you enter into different brainwave states while you're asleep.
Right.
Mhm.
And so you are actually able to, on one of those wavelengths, get a glimpse of the future and bring that information back down. Something like a deja vu. I mean, and this happens to us a lot. Again, when you dream, sometimes, yeah, you might only retain a fragment. Like, people are probably familiar. You wake up, you had a fascinating dream. If you don't write it down real quick, if you don't recite it real quick, you're gonna forget it. And so,
Yeah.
you might be sitting at the breakfast table and tell your significant other, "Oh, I had this fascinating dream." And you try to recall it, and you're like able to spit out a couple of bits, and you're like, "Oh, but there's something else that happened that you don't remember at all." So with the deja vu, in some cases, it's like bits from one of those dreams. You got a little taste of the future, and you couldn't remember the whole thing. So somewhere in the back of your mind, it just, that image kind of set itself in there. You kind of retained a little bit of it.
Mhm.
And so, I don't know, a week later, you're standing in the location of where, you saw that image while you were sleeping, and you're like, wait a minute, this seems so familiar. I can't quite place it. It looks like a deja
Mhm.
vu.
Yep.
But there's another way to look at deja vus too. So we've been talking a lot about, stack time theory, other dimensions, this sort of thing, that all time is concurrent. Well, if all time is concurrent and you are a believer in reincarnation, where you had past lives and you're going to have future lives, but all time is concurrent, yeah, that would mean that your past lives and your future lives are here as well with you. So it could very well be that when you walk into a room and you suddenly have a deja vu moment, you could actually be standing in a room in which one of your past lives is actually there with you. And that's why it seems so dang familiar.
Mm. Wow. That's going to change forever how I look at things
Yeah.
now.
Man, that
Doesn't it?
yeah,
Yeah. Because I
Yeah.
have deja vu a lot,
I
actually.
do. Yeah, that happens more than I care to admit.
Uh-huh.
Well, Mike, we're getting towards the end of this because I think my mind is thoroughly warped at this particular point. It's so awesome. And I know we talked about this before, and I know we kind of tongue in cheek this a little bit, but you mentioned time travel and then real time travel. Yeah, I guess we've kind of covered it, like I said, but do you ever see, aside from just meditative, do you ever see a future where we will time travel? I guess in the generally accepted version of time travel, or
We
do
don't
you
really
think it?
accept it. Like, you have to have a machine to do it.
Right,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
or one of those sort of very typical linear type, or I guess movie type.
Yeah, so like Ronald Mallett has thrown some ideas out there. He's the one that talks a lot about the using a black hole
Mm-hmm.
to bring us to the past, but you could only go as far back as when the black hole was created. So if that black hole was created at the time of the ancient Egyptians, and you were trying to go back to the time of the dinosaurs, you would only get back to the time of the ancient Egyptians. That's as far back. Um, so he's been kind of theorizing that if you were to build a machine that could, I guess, spin as fast as a black hole and generate that type of gravity that would bend space and time,
Hmm.
then you would be able to use that to time travel. But you could only go back as far in time as when that machine was created. Okay.
Gotcha.
Well, that doesn't really take us back to where we want to go, does it?
No,
No.
Um,
no, I
so
prefer a stone.
yeah, give me the DeLorean.
Yeah,
Put
Again,
the
that would be
exact
fun.
date and exact time.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it would take. I'm always going to go back to, at least as far as my research right now, I'm always going to go back to meditation and the consciousness. But again, if we can develop a technology in which we could harness whatever that frequency is, when we tune into a moment, we get a glimpse of the past, and we're having a time slip. If there's a way that we could just have that technology harness that frequency so that you're not changing, that moment isn't changing, and the world around us isn't changing its frequency either, everything stays stable, then that might be a way that we can do it and be able to interact cohesively with another moment in time. Yeah, I don't know if we'd still be able to step back into there, physically, like that's what everybody wants.
right.
Yeah.
And I do believe that it is possible, because when these slips happen, we are interacting with the world around us. The Versailles Times, so they were walking around the whole
Right.
garden for a little while
Absolutely.
when it happened. And then, of course, finally dissipated away. So there is a way for that to happen. I think there could be technology to help stabilize that when it happens. But I don't think it's going to be jumping in a DeLorean or like the classic, okay, the time machine,
Right.
jumping into something like that. But
Mhm.
it would be fun.
I love meditative a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes better sense to me anyway.
Well, just like in the Somewhere in Time movie, that's the whole thing is he meditates.
Right.
It takes him forever to
And he
finally
just
get it
convinces
right.
himself. He
Yeah.
convinces himself that he is back at another point in time,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
it happens. Yeah,
And that does
and
make a lot more
Richard
sense.
Matheson, he based his research. That wasn't just out of his. I mean, sure, it's a fictional piece of work. It did come out of his mind, but he had
Right.
consulted a number of different philosophy books on time. Some that were ancient, some that were more contemporary to his era. And he utilized a lot of those different ideas within the book to develop his story. So it wasn't just some fanciful thinking on his part. He put a lot of thought into that and used ideas and research of people that had come before him on that.
Yeah. Beautiful movie.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah, and it's hard. It's a romance.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's a sad one.
It is.
The
Yeah.
ending is
Yeah.
so sad.
But
Well, Mike-
that movie has touched so many hearts. They hold an annual conference there every year at the
Oh,
Grand
do they
Hotel.
really?
Yeah, in Mackinac Island.
Huh.
Yeah,
That's
they've
awesome.
really
cool.
embraced it. Mhm.
Yeah, we definitely want to go to Mackinac someday because it's just such an amazing place. But
Yeah.
we have to check that
Yeah,
out.
That's
if
really
you
cool.
go to the theater, so the
Mhm.
where they housed the play during the movie, if you go
Yes.
to that theater, which is it's just at a hotel there, they're playing that movie. So we went there this
Aw.
past summer, and we went to the Grand Hotel, so we toured all that. Saw the different rooms. They have a nice little memorial there for the movie, and then walked around and toured the area. Went to the area by the lake where they had their first moment where they met, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you go to that theater, which we did, we sat down, we were watching the movie right there.
That's so cool.
That's so neat.
I love
What
to
a
hear
great way
that.
to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Well, Mike, listen, we're so glad you took time with us today.
Mhm.
Where can our audience find you, and what are some of the things that you'd like for our audience? Of course, I'm going to hold it up because it was an amazing book, but
Yeah.
Read it.
Thank you.
read this is amazing. But yeah, if you could tell us or
Yeah,
tell our audience
absolutely.
kind of how to find you.
Yeah, my primary website, MikeRicksecker.com. You can find Travels Through Time there, as well as all my other books. You can find links to my podcast, Connecting the Universe, there, as well as my I have a community and online learning portal called the Connected Universe Portal, which is connecteduniverseportal.com. Welcome everybody, like-minded people that are interested in this type of research to come join us out there. And then I have a new blog, Mike Ricksecker's Connected Universe, which is on Substack. So that's connecteduniverse.substack.com.
Awesome.
Great. Well,
Wow. Well, I think that's
Thank
it.
you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. And we appreciate you
folks.
spending time with us. And, we look forward to all the stuff you do in the future. And we're actually going to go to Paracon next year. And I think you're going to be one of the guests out there. So maybe we'll run into each other.
Yeah, in Casey.
That'll be
Yeah,
wonderful to
Casey.
see you then.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you take care. And thank you so much.
All right, take care. And
Yeah.
Mind.
Well, I think I've officially reached every edge of my brain tonight.
Yeah. Well, I felt that way reading the book. I mean,
Yeah.
but the great thing about it, as he is on the show, is he explains it really well.
Yeah, he does.
For those of you, like for me at least, science was not my best subject in school, especially physics. So the way he describes it by using illustrations and stuff and using like the river as an example, it helps understand what he's talking about. And
Yeah.
so now I get it.
Yeah.
I may not fully 100%, none of us will fully understand it, but I see where it could be possible and where it makes sense.
Yep.
A lot more than watching any of the superhero movies that, they flip between time, which doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. And especially with the whole Tesseract and everything, that just,
Yeah.
But listen, you guys, you got to see him. You got to, I guess we kind of got to get real deep into that conversation, but you have to read this book.
Yeah.
It is
I mean,
so
there's
good.
so much more that he
Yeah.
explains and talks about. It's just way too much that we could discuss within this hour. But he also, he's got the podcast that he does and he's got his channel. You should go check out some of his episodes because he, tries to focus on one thing at a time and he can get more in depth on those things.
Yep.
So, if you're interested, I would definitely go check that stuff out.
Yeah. And tell us what you think, guys. Comment down below. We've got nothing but adoration and everything for everything that we've done. And we're completely happy with everything that you guys do. Thank you so much for all the support. Yeah. Tell us what you think. We've got some great shows coming up.
Yes, we do.
And we're pretty excited. So yeah, like, subscribe, follow all those.
Come check us out on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, drop by, see us. We've got some cool stuff coming out. We're going to put stuff on there. It's a great way to reach us too, other than info@gxparanormal.com. I did it.
Yes, you did.
I threw it in. So yeah, and also reach out to us there if you guys want to be on the show or you guys want anything covered. But listen, it was a great show. It was a bit of a long one, but I'm glad you guys stuck around, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye, guys.